Welcome. Great to be here with everyone.
You too. It's good to be here.
Good. While you're enjoying, we'll just say hello. Make sure there's seats around. I might need to.
You make a few more people.
Rearrange here.
Eat your food.
Oh. Yeah,
What?
that's Rabbi's.
Oh.
Recipes.
In Israel.
And hints. What tips on how to do it.
Just want to come. Are you able to move? Yes. Oh, right here.
How was the?
Perfect. So we also want to welcome Gabrielle's parents.
Thank you.
Our youth directors visiting from Eilat for their daughter's graduation. Is earning a master's degree. So mazal tov. Wonderful to have you. אני אנסה לתרגם קצת. Right, well. But wanted to look today at the Midrash and focus on the idea of what does treasure look like for the Jewish people. And I have a source sheet I'll put up on the screen also so we can see it, and for those on Zoom that can see it as well. And I wanted to start, this is kind of a classic story many of you may be familiar with. That was compiled by Martin Buber, although it's attributed to the Baal Shem Tov or to others in Hasidic lore. Is there anyone that wants? I'll read it while everyone's eating. Once you're finished, I'll turn to you to read stories. But this is the version as written by Martin Buber, the story "The Treasure" in his work "Tales of the Hasidim," 1948. Rabbi Bunam used to tell young men who came to him for the first time the story of Rabbi Isaac, the son of Rabbi Yekel in Krakow. After many years of great poverty, which had never shaken his faith in God, he dreamed someone bade him look for a treasure in Prague, under the bridge which leads to the king's palace. When the dream recurred a third time, Rabbi Isaac prepared for the journey and set out for Prague. But the bridge was guarded day and night, and he did not dare to start digging. Nevertheless, he went to the bridge every morning and kept walking around it until evening. Finally, the captain of the guards, who had been watching him, asked in a kindly way whether he was looking for something or waiting for somebody. Rabbi Isaac told him of the dream which had brought him here from a faraway country. The captain laughed. "And so, to please the dream, you poor fellow wore out your shoes to come here? As for having faith in dreams, if I had had it, I should have had to get going when a dream once told me to go to Krakow and dig for treasure under the stove in the room of a Jew, Isaac, the son of Yekel. That was the name, Isaac, son of Yekel. I can just imagine what it would be like, how I should have to try every house over there where one half of the Jews are named Isaac and the other Yekel." And he laughed again. Rabbi Isaac bowed, traveled home, dug up the treasure from under the stove, and built the house of prayer, which is called Reb Isaac's Shul. So this is a story, Martin Buber writes this, although he hears it's a story that he heard from Hasidim. The exact origin is unknown. He hears it from Rabbi Bunam, some attributed to the Baal Shem Tov. But just want to hear any thoughts, what does this story tell us about the notion of treasure, the Jewish conception of treasure here? Okay, it's in your own home. Right, it might be you seek so far, you look so far to find treasure, and there it is, right under. You have the treasure right in your very own home, buried right underneath you.
I think that faith in the dream was in the way it
Having faith in a dream, okay.
that he followed both his dream and he followed the other fellow.
Oh, good, yeah. Good. The treasure is right in your home, but you don't realize it right away. It takes effort. In fact, it took the effort of traveling all the way to Prague, right? And reaching this person who was able to share his dream, right? The captain of the guards. So it took a lot of effort to find the treasure, even that was right there the whole time. Right? Yep.
I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the burning bush and
the only person who saw it was Moshe.
Okay,
And I'm thinking the same way here. It was there all along, but you didn't have, your eyes weren't open.
great. It takes the right eyes. Just, I love that. In fact, according to Midrash, we actually have a story that the burning bush was actually one of 10 items that God created right during creation. It was right before the Shabbat, right before the end of the 6 days of creation. There's a famous Midrash, I'll need to find the source to send, that there were 10 items that you might see as miraculous that were actually created from the very beginning, but it took until the right person saw it. And it wasn't until Moshe came upon that bush that had been burning since time immemorial. It took someone to realize that here was a miracle. But yeah. Beautiful. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Interesting is that he goes to Prague and he goes to the original, and the person who don't want that Semitism involved.
Yeah.
In other words, he's talking about the Jew and his section.
Right. This story, you're right. The story doesn't have, right, the story is not looking at it through that lens, but that's interesting. I also want to just point out before we move on here, you know what Rabbi Asik did with the treasure, right? Here he found this treasure, and what did he do? He used it to build a congregation, a synagogue, right? Rabbi Asik's shul. That here the greatest treasure is to have your place of gathering, your place of worship.
It would be better if you didn't.
He named it after himself.
Maybe.
Anonymously.
It's called, right? Note, it's called. He didn't name it for himself, but it's.
It was Agnon, now it's been.
What is that?
So when we think about treasure, what do the Jewish people treasure the most?
I just said, what is treasure?
So here, right, the treasure is the Beit Knesset, is the shul. What else is seen as treasure? You know,
Leaving us alone.
Torah,
Yeah,
that's treasure.
Life.
Life is treasure.
Family.
Family, children are treasure. Torah is treasure. Good. So all of these are great answers, and we'll actually look at that, what our tradition has to say about that. But with Shavuot coming, I wanted to pull, these are, looking at a midrash here, Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni is a collection of midrashim that's compiled in the Middle Ages, somewhere between the 11th and 14th centuries. With midrashim that date back to ancient times, to the 2,000 years ago. Some of the more recent midrashim are from the 12th century. It's certainly very old. We don't have an exact date, but this particular midrash, the Yalkut Shimoni, it's in Hebrew and then in English. Yalkut Shimoni Anach 607. Here it's Yalkut Shimoni Anach, and it's really on Megillat Ruth. Tafresh Zayin 607. Do we have anyone? We'll read. You're welcome to read it in Hebrew. We'll read, because I think for most the English will be easier. So if you want to read, do we have a volunteer that wants to read here? Yalkut Shimoni Anach 607. Okay.
There was once a pious man with a righteous wife. The couple lost all their money, and they found work plowing a field, where he met Elijah, a prophet disguised as an Arab. Elijah said to him, "You have 6 years of wealth coming to you. Do you want them now or at the end of your life?" The wicked man said to him, "You're just a conjurer. You have nothing to give me. Please go away and leave me." Elijah came back to him again and again, and the third time the pious man said, "Let me consult with my wife." He went to his wife and said, "This man has come to me 3 times to say that I have 6 years of wealth coming to me. He wants to know when I want them, now or at the end of my life." She said, "Tell him to give you the money now. Show me the money." He went to tell this to Elijah, who said to him, "Go home. Even before you get to the gate of your front garden, you will see that you have been blessed." The couple's children had been playing in the dirt of their yard, where they found enough money to support their family for 6 years. So they called their mother. She ran out to tell her husband the good news, even before he got to the gate of their house. He immediately thanked God. What did his wife do? She said to him, God has been extremely kind to us, giving us all this money. Let's spend these 6 years helping others. Maybe then God will give us more. God's a So they did, and at the end of the 6 years, Elijah came and said, time has come for me to take back what I gave you. And the pious man said, when I accepted the money, I consulted with my wife. Now that it's time to give it back, let me consult with her again. So he went to her and said, the man has come to take back what he gave us. She told him, if he can find people who will use the money better than we did, he should take it. Yeah, God knew about all the good things they had done for others while they had wealth and decided to give them even more, as it is said in Isaiah 32:17. The fruit of righteousness will be peace.
Okay. So this story, right, this is a midrash from Yalkut Shimoni, and it's connected. We'll ask after we kind of think about the midrash itself, what the connection might be to the book of Ruth, to Megillat Ruth. But any thoughts on this story here? On this midrash?
Very well.
Very well, right? No, it does strike me, and I think it's beautiful to see because we don't always see it. You know, the person who's really the one who's making the decisions that are viewed as meritorious are the wife and I guess he has the husband has the good insight to consult his wife on on all occasions. And no, it is. Yeah. No, it's good to see that. Yeah, any thoughts though, any other thoughts on the midrash? Yeah.
Use your time well.
Use your time well. Right, I see, right, don't squander the treasure, right, that you, here they got this treasure, this wealth, and they used it for good, right, they didn't squander it. Yeah, Nelson.
Two things. One is he not only did he have the good sense to consult his wife, he also had the good sense to follow her advice.
Yep.
Those are two different things. The second thing, maybe is more important, I don't know, is that he comes in the disguise of an Arab. So even people who maybe you might think of as your enemy can still be agents of God. Positive.
Okay, and to be honest, I don't know, you know, this is actually the word if you look at the Hebrew, and we don't know exact era, this is from the early Middle Ages, 11th, 12th century. We don't know what Aravi referred to in that time, because it says Pa'am echad haya choresh b'sadeh, pagabo Eliyahu zichrono livracha bidmut Aravi echad. We don't know. This isn't modern day. We don't know what exactly that means, but interesting to know. Yeah.
I was actually, before, without having heard this, I was thinking it was going a different direction, and I'm thinking about the Shemitah year, and that after 6 years, you have to relinquish.
Oh,
In
beautiful.
the
Yeah.
7th year, so I was connecting it to that.
Yeah, no, the beautiful connection to this week's parasha, right? We learn about the
That's why
Shemitah
I
year,
went there.
which is
That's
great.
exactly where I went there.
There will be 6 years. If you're not familiar with, actually, this week's parasha gives the law of Shemitah, which is that just as we have a Sabbath every 7 days, we have Shabbat and we rest. The land actually has its own Shabbat after 6 years of work. The 7th year, you actually are not allowed to work the land. I mean, this is still practiced in Israel. In fact, I think in 3 years from now, I think will be the next 3 or 4 years from now will be the next Shemitah year where the land isn't worked and farmers don't work the land of Israel.
Samlim.
Well, if they're following the Shemitah, right?
What is
Yeah,
the
David.
context of the verse of Isaiah? How I'm having a little bit of a struggle with how this story relates to peace, at least is, I mean, it does say shalom in Hebrew, it's a little bit broader than peace, but.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if I continued on, this is the story, but if you continue on in the Midrash, it talks about the connection of peace and Gmilut Chasadim by spreading charity and spreading good deeds, you know, it leads to shalom, it leads to to peace. I need to look up, actually, if anyone wants to, you can look in Isaiah, the specific,
A lot of times when they take something
Right.
out of context.
yeah, I'll look it up here while we're.
Work out is rather different than the original text, or
Right.
sometimes it's the same.
That being said, right, oftentimes Midrash pulls verses out of context. So I can look up the context, but it may not have been relevant in
And Judy.
the writer's eyes.
I was amazed too. I didn't think we might have all been when the decision was expected. Oh, others, that was already a wow.
Yeah.
That's not where I thought.
Yeah.
But then I thought it was a geometric increase, maybe an exponential, but not a quantity. When they said, I would give back, and she said, maybe that's the best thing. Maybe we'll go to somebody else. I mean, that just took her righteousness
Right,
to a whole different level. And that's what I was expecting. I'm wondering if it was that act that was what was mirrored them the final decree, if they had just said, okay, you want it, it's yours, but without them recognizing it might have gone on to do even more good. I remember the mental really sounding back in the God's eyes.
Yeah, no, and I think that's beautiful, right? I think there's two, right? First, that they take this money to do good and the first thought isn't let's use it for ourselves, even though the family, actually the beginning of the Midrash shares that the family is not doing well, that the family has lost all of their money. And the first instinct is to help others. And then the second, right, if someone else can do better at that than us, then give it to them, right? Is a pretty amazing statement. And maybe, why in the Midrash, God looks so kindly on this, on these
Because I think
people.
doing the good work is also part of spreading that peace. So having others who can contribute, and participate in
Right.
doing good deeds, is an important part of it.
Yeah, Dave.
Certainly also the case that, the basic cool. Is how you're using it. How one is used. That's the important thing. Not the money itself.
Right, the money is a tool for mitzvot and to do good. Right. So Isaiah, just for your question about this verse from Isaiah, and you might even recognize this from our prayer book. We pull this in English, but this is kind of a prophecy on end of days when things will be at peace. For the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness calm and confidence forever. Then my people shall dwell in peaceful homes and secure dwellings and untroubled places of rest. Right, Maaseh hatzedakah shalom va'avodat hatzedakah hashket mavetach hadolam. So it's kind of foreseeing, and as much of Isaiah is, a better future.
Yeah, so peace and security.
Peace as security, peace as comfort, right? Any connection? What does this have to do with Megillat Ruth? What does this have to do with the book of Ruth? Any thoughts?
Does the mitzvah that you would know.
Okay.
Willing to marry your own man. And not usually.
Okay, and I'll take it to take it a step back, right? Ruth falls on very hard times, right? Her husband passes away, and her husband's brother, the family, Naomi, is on very hard times. And right, Ruth could go back to her family, but instead, right, says, right, your people will be my people. And she does something that's like a wow moment in some ways. Like Bill shared right here, they receive the money, there's hardship, and
looking at it the other way around,
Mhm.
Boaz used money that he had
Right.
to do right by.
right, and they use it to do good.
And she
And-
did Hesed.
She does, yeah.
She did Hesed.
Right, she does chesed and she gets rewarded, and we're gonna see that here in a moment. In many ways, that's why I at least see this particular midrash kind of mirrors in many ways the story of Ruth, which we read on Shavuot. And we'll move here. We talk about what is treasure. And when we mentioned what is Jewish treasure, Torah is something that was mentioned here. We know this verse from Mishlei, from Proverbs. Proverbs, Etz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchea me'ushar. Right, we say this every time we put the Torah away, from the Tanakh, from the Bible. She is a tree of life to those who grasp her, and whoever holds on to her is happy. That the Torah is the tree of life. That's how we interpret this verse. And so by holding on, that your treasure, the treasure comes from following Torah. In fact, right in this very same chapter of Proverbs, Orech Yamim Bimina Uvismola Osher V'Chavod, in her right hand, meaning in the Torah's right hand, like in the follower of Torah's right hand is length of days, in her left riches and honor. What does this mean? And this I think is fascinating here. Rashi's commentary on this verse. What does it mean? In its right hand, those who make the right use of it and engage in it for its own sake will have length of days and surely riches and honor. But those who make the wrong, left under interprets as wrong use of it, who engage in it not for its own sake, will still have riches and honor. And a fascinating, right? That Rashi's the interpretation that Rashi gives of this verse is that as long as you're following Torah, even if it's not with the right intent, you still will be rewarded. You still will be rewarded. Any thoughts on this idea that Rashi interprets? Yeah.
Still. Believe it. People absorb the goodness of it.
Good. That's Jewish tradition, right? To still feel, I don't understand why keep kosher, why shake lulav and etrog, why, I don't understand the prayer even, to why should I read this? It doesn't make sense to me. And what's the traditional Jewish answer is, right? Do it anyway, right? You'll come to understand, or even if you don't come to understand, you'll know that it's for a higher purpose. It's for connecting with God. It's for connecting with our people.
I have to disagree with what I heard the other side of the room. So it's not a go question, it's do it and a question.
So traditional, right? A traditional response. But I would argue, as David does, right? It's important to understand. It's important to question. It's important, and we need to think, right? If we're doing something for not the right reasons, right? Then we shouldn't be doing.
Far enough back in history, way beyond what's come since the Holocaust, we would see that we've always been questioning. Those who don't question now are the ones who are breaking.
So yes, in fact, right, what I'll say is we're B'nai Yisrael, Maza Yisrael. What does Yisrael mean? But literally to struggle or to wrestle with God. And so actually, I think it's part of the very foundation of who we are as a people to struggle, to try to understand, right?
It's always within certain bounds.
So this is right. This is the balance, right? Is that what does it mean to struggle and wrestle with God, and where are the bounds? And that's a question that you see through Jewish history and through the history of our people, where the boundaries are and what boundaries the community sets. Yeah.
We recently saw the statue of Spinoza in Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a struggle, but there's always questions. And we are known to, I hate to say be nosy, but we want to know why and what's going on. And that.
It's good. I mean, to question, we see as, yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
They-
No, questioning and education, are prime core values. And right, it's a common refrain, right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Right, and wanting to understand, not, also, right, there's the joke, when you think about, right, finding your answer, and everyone has different answers. There's the joke about, right, the Jew that gets stranded on the island and builds 2 synagogues, and they come find him, later. They said, well, that's the shul that I pray in, and this is the shul that I would never step foot in. That are both he builds both on the island. But it's, there's something, right? These are jokes, but there's something, in history, that leads to these kinds of jokes that we have questioned and that one answer, it's not one size fits all. Yeah.
This takes us too far.
Yeah.
But this doesn't seem to always have been the case. I don't believe the common Jew study Torah all, got to know me all the time. You would go to the local rabbi, they would have answers for you. You weren't necessarily incumbent to have done that intensive study and therefore necessarily that intensive questioning. So it wasn't printing press time. I mean, at what point in our history did it shift from we're just doers without, we can question, but we ask our authoritative representative those questions.
They were studying, they were using the clip note version.
Well, to some degree, I think both can be true to some degree. I think there's, right,
It can be, but I don't think it has. been historically.
Well, I think, well, if you look at.
you wanna say a word out?
And I'll just come up to what is the, I'll give it time, it's really arguable that many Jews were going along doing their business and the rabbis were doing their business. We inherit that, but there's at least a credible argument that most of the people were paying out of the holidays they were supposed to do. All of that. On the other hand, in the Middle Ages, there are all kinds of questions, and how do you impact all over Europe and beyond? How do we answer this question? Sadly, I watched this sort of like, but while they were, there were an awful lot of questions asked that had to be really for rabbi, but you look at some of those.
Makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to look.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think both. The Jewish people have been going to their rabbis or to authorities, in leadership to ask questions for practice. But I also think it's true throughout history that Jewish communities and individuals have been finding their own ways of connecting. We have, for example, so many different rituals around the Passover Seder, which didn't come top down, but communities and different people started doing practices, and they were, they were adopted because people, enjoyed them and felt connection through them. I'll share, as I know, there's an Indian heritage that Tu B'Shvat, there was a whole tradition that was developed by the community in Malida in India. And
Malida is a symbol of new fruits.
Right.
Thank God for the fruits.
Right. That was not, it wasn't top down, but the community felt connection and connected to Tu B'Shvat around giving of the Torah, which is, Shavuot, which we're celebrating in a couple weeks.
There's
Yeah.
actually a universal,
Mhm.
universal type thing like this.
Yeah.
Called Nidra. That wasn't top down, it was the people wanted it.
Right, Kol Nidre is
And
an
we
example,
accepted it
even,
throughout the world.
this is kind of the most, maybe a radical example, but the Hanukkah becoming a great celebration. Most scholars don't think the rabbis loved the idea of Hanukkah. After all, Hanukkah is a festival of lights at the darkest time of the year. It's very similar to Roman pagan holidays. In fact, even, Christmas, there's lights at the darkest time of the year. There's Kwanzaa as well. Most scholars feel like this is something the Jews were doing, and the rabbis tried to make sense of it and say, how can we connect this to Jewish tradition in some ways? Not to say, the story of Hanukkah is a very powerful story, but in many ways, Hanukkah's prominence is not the rabbis doing. But the miracle, the oil appears in the Talmud, written maybe 500 years after, 600 years after the story itself. So I think both are true, and I think both have, to some degree, both have been true throughout. You're correct, maybe there are certain eras where Jews were more going to the rabbi or to the leader, and certain eras today, I think the conservative movement in many ways, is about empowering everyone to understand and read. But yeah,
Ashrei is an alphabetical.
Yeah. yeah.
Wasn't that done so people would be able to, that they didn't read?
Well, so Ashrei is in the Bible itself. It's possible that was a part of the consideration. Traditionally, it's ascribed, to King David. But it possibly, yeah.
There's a lot of prayers in the prayer book that are.
There are a lot of alphabetic
Yeah.
acrostics, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was for memory reasons.
Certainly that helps.
Most of the, Shabbat, where you operate the reverse,
Right, the Tikanta Shabbat goes in reverse alphabetical order, right? Okay. If you've never noticed that, you can read right. Tikanta Shabbat Ratzita Korbanoteiha. It goes in reverse alphabetical order. So I want to turn here to the next page. And the Yalkut Shimoni, actually, just before the story we read, the Midrash we read, asks an interesting question, and I don't love the answer that the Midrash gives, but we can read it. Is there anyone that wants to read here for us? Yalkut Shimoni, this is also in the anthology connected to the Book of Ruth. A question it asks here, 596.
What does the book
Anyone?
of Ruth have to do with Shavuot? This, reading it on Shavuot, is to teach us that the Torah was only given through suffering and poverty.
Any thoughts on this? I don't love that this particular answer myself, but what do you think about this? Yeah.
one is, how a lot of Jews suffering in poverty. I don't know who this is from, to, and when it was written exactly.
Yeah, roughly 11th, 12th century, we're assuming, but yeah.
That's the setting, that's the source of comfort. So maybe that's a way of looking at it.
So, go ahead.
Positively, from our seats of relative comfort.
Right, now, so I do see it, and it likely, we don't have an exact date, but it seems to have been written. This is one of the earliest sources that mentions that Ruth is even read on Shavuot. So it's one of the early connections, one of the earliest sources that we have that mentions the book of Ruth, Megillat Ruth, being read on Shavuot. And I think there is some comfort. This was written in, Europe during the period of the Crusades, which was a very tumultuous and very challenging time for the Jewish communities. There's a lot of beauty in the idea that there's reward. We'll go through the suffering and there's reward on the other side. That the Torah is the reward.
Well, isn't that part of the covenant with, you will suffer for 400 years,
Right,
and then we'll
enslavement,
take you out to the land. And so in a way, it was preordained that we're going to have suffering and a difficult time.
Okay, yeah.
17 times.
So what is the reward? We see the reward. So it is, what is Ruth's? We talked about Ruth went through, there was a lot of suffering in her life, and in the end, we see reward. What is the reward here? At the end of the book of Ruth, the greatest reward, in the way the book is written, is the very end. And I'll read, here I have the psukim, Yud Gimel Ad Yud Zayin. Here, so 13 to 17. So Boaz married Ruth, she became his wife, and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, who Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law, and her sons had passed away, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel." And I'm going to jump the ikar here, the main point is that the son is named Oved, but Oved has a child named Yishai, and Yishai has a child named David. And who is David? David is Melech David, and not only the king of Israel, but also the progenitor to Mashiach. That we say Mashiach ben David. That here Ruth went through all of the struggles, and I'll note that Ruth was not born Jewish. She was a foreigner. She was from Moab.
This is all.
What? But here, through the struggling, what comes out of that struggling? Not only Melech Yisrael, not only the king of Israel, but also ultimately Mashiach.
but it says that Ben יולד לנעמי, לא לרות. They really relate the baby to Naomi, not to Ruth.
So both are right, both are true, I think if I,
And the neighbors, they placed the baby in
So
Naomi's
they
arms.
do, I'm actually looking at that.
ותקראנה לו השכנות
Right.
שב לאמו.
So I think both are true, right? So they do, the baby is a baby for Naomi who's lost both of her sons. But it does say at the end, if you look at Tetzayin, Vatehilo leomanet, they don't consider her the mother directly. I don't know, it's an interesting way the verse is written.
Is the estate of Ruth's husband who died, came, first child,
It definitely, it could be that the child is considered as though, and we have the levirate marriage, if you're familiar with, there's actually a whole concept, ibum, in the Torah, that when a husband passes away without having a child, when his widow remarries and has a child, it's as though that first child is the child and the progenitor of the deceased husband.
If this had been
In
the
some
daughter-
ways,
if it had been the daughter, it would have been the daughter of Ruth, and that's it, right?
what?
If this had been a daughter instead of a son,
Yeah.
or a boy and a girl, it would have just
Yeah.
been. a
Right,
child.
and we also, right, we're looking through a modern lens at which, this is from a different era, clearly.
That's
But
the reason I brought it up, because maybe that's the way of understanding that in your life.
maybe, and Ruth, you have a good point as as well, yeah.
Interesting that he was redeemed.
Yeah.
The whole idea. Come on. When we read about Isaiah and whatnot, with me, it's sort of that the Bible was.
Oh, so, right, so there's a question, and I haven't looked into and don't recall, the scholarly, dating. I don't know when Ruth is believed to have been written vis-a-vis Isaiah and the other books. Regardless of whether Messiah is kind of in here, definitely the idea of Melech, of the king of Israel, that this is the lineage of the kingdom, is certainly there. But yeah, I don't know the dating. I don't know when the book of Ruth is believed to have been written and when, in comparison with the other books.
It's a beautiful book, what can we say?
Yeah, yes. And the reward here, right, is the kingdom. It's also, right, Torah, as we see the connection with Megillat Ruth to Shavuot. I want to turn here to our the last source here. In the beauty of treasure and what we do with treasure. And see if there's anyone that wants to read here. This is from Bava Batra. This is in the Talmud, Yud Aleph, Daf Aleph. And this is a story that's actually not, the story is about someone who's not part of the Jewish community, but it's related by the rabbinic leaders of Talmudic times to try to understand the power of what we do with treasure. Does anyone want to read here? You want to? Okay, great.
Baba Batra. The sages taught there was an incident involving King Munbaz, who liberally gave away his treasures and the treasures of his ancestors in the years of drought, distributing the money to the poor. His brothers and his father's household joined together against him to protest against his actions, and they said to him, "Your ancestors stored up money in their treasuries and added to the treasures of their ancestors, and you are liberally distributing it all to the poor?" King Munbaz said to them, "Not so. My ancestors stored up below, whereas I am storing above. As it is stated, truth will spring out of the earth, and righteousness will look down from heaven. Psalms 85:12, meaning that the righteous deeds that one has performed are stored up in heaven. My ancestors stored up treasures in a place where the human hand can reach, and so their treasures could have been robbed. Whereas I'm storing up treasures in a place where the human hand cannot reach, and so they are secure. As it is stated, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your soul. Psalms 89:15.
Thank you.
Love it.
Any thoughts on this text from the Talmud?
It's great for this king with both songs.
What?
The king is
The
quoting-
king is quoting Psalm. So I said, right, the king is not from the Jewish community, but clearly the story is related by the rabbis of the Talmuds and their understanding. King Munbaz, I'm not sure, I don't know. I can try to see what I can find quickly on King Munbaz. He's a Persian, Parthian.
Yeah, me too. I did too.
Munbaz of Adiaben. I'll need to,
Okay.
no, he actually, I take it back. According to tradition in the Talmud, he did later in life convert to become Jewish. And so maybe that's why he's quoting Psalms here.
So is this before?
Adia Ben, I'll need to look more about the story of King Munbaz here. But I think it's a fascinating story. Regardless, I'll look into who King Munbaz is a little more here in the story. But again, we see the notion that here he's from a line of kings and monarchs that just stored treasure, and the assumption was that you're going to continue to just accumulate treasure.
People do that.
And
Yes.
Munbaz is saying, no, really the way to accumulate treasure is to give it to those in need. That you're actually storing the treasure in a place no one can come and get it from you because you've racked up points, in heaven. You've racked up your store of treasure for Olam Haba in Shamayim.
It's like, let's do it, let's around.
Yeah, no, and right, a common refrain that, right, you can't do anything, with your wealth, once you pass away, right? We want to use it, and here Munbaz is saying, right, let's use it. Here we have all of this gold, all of this wealth stored away. What good is it? All it's there for is for someone to take it one day, right? Right, right. Right. Right, creating a new treasury. And right, it's not that he's using the wealth on himself, right? It's that he's using the wealth, and that's, I think, the beauty and similar message that we've seen. Right, I'm putting treasure in the treasure, yeah. I'm putting the treasure in the treasury, yeah.
Spreading wealth, because structures.
He buys from.
Oh, interesting, right, that's that, right, that could be, right, subtext here, is an interesting idea. This translation doesn't show, but there's commentary, right, that what's he doing, he's showing where the greatest wealth lies, actually, and I wanted to end, with this idea, and I think we shared what's the greatest treasure to the Jewish community, the Torah, and then I think we said human beings, right, and ultimately, right, the treasure comes to people as they follow Torah. But here, ultimately, I think this story is showing the greatest treasure is human beings, and where is the best way that King Munbaz can use his wealth and his treasury is to help what really is the greatest treasure in the world, is to help, right, his subjects, but it's to help the people that are suffering from drought here. And Jewish tradition, right, views all of this as treasure, but ultimately, right, it's the individual that's treasured, and that each of us are a treasure, you know, in and of ourselves. And I liken that back to this story that Martin Buber shares, that we each have that treasure. It might not be easy to find, but that treasure is buried beneath us. It's right around us somewhere. We just need to seek and look hard to find it. In fact, it says in our tradition, it says, right, if you harm even a single person, if you kill a single person, it's as though you've destroyed the entire world. And the same thing is true if you save an entire person. If you save one single person, right, then it's as though you've saved the entire world, because for that person, it is their entire world. And that really, I think, is together with Torah and together with all the stories, right, using the wealth and using the treasure to help others around us receives greater reward, because it's helping the greatest treasure and helping support the greatest treasure that we have. So I want to wish everyone, you know, continued learning. It's always a great pleasure to learn with everyone here. An early Chag Sameach, which inspired some of the texts around Megillat Ruth as we celebrate Shavuot in a little over a week. Well, we heard one answer. We heard one answer, but I'll let you think about it, and of course, come next week. And for everyone that's here for Shavuot, join us Sunday evening, June 1st. We'll be studying throughout the night. I think we have 35 plus teachers, rabbis, cantors, educators that'll be studying from 7 p.m. all the way through our Shacharit, our morning service at 7 in the morning. So please join us if you're able to. If you're not able to come in person, and also some of the sessions will be streamed. So look for that. But always great to learn with everyone. And hopefully we found some midrashim you hadn't seen before.
People looking down, sending things out. I mean, this speaks very clearly.
Yeah. No, but it's in the Bible. You know, it's pre-Christian. In some ways, we may shy away from it because it's so prominent in Christian theology, but it exists. You know, angels coming down from heaven is in the Bible. You know, that's the Jacob's ladder you see. So it's prominent throughout the Torah.
I guess because
part of why it's a Christian feel is because they're learning the same, you know, the book of Psalms is something they look at as well. And you know, they call it the Old Testament, it's called Torah, but that's really the origins of Christian theology also, so.
The Hebrew scripture.
In fact, most Christians pay much more attention to the prophet than to the books of Torah. But
My original question.
Noah Bickar might be a better person to ask.
He's coming, isn't he?
Yeah.
So we're talking about what is Ruth happening in these books. My question is, what is just? This is the end of the counting season. It's a this holiday.
So it's an interesting, so is Sukkot.
I know,
But all of the holidays, I mean, the Torah gives, and it's interesting. If you go back long enough and you look at what scholars have to say about this, it's likely scholars say that these were harvest festivals that which community also attributed the major events in their formation to, so they do both. So
but it was also,
yeah.
it was all.
Yeah, but Shavuot is talked about in the Torah, yeah. What I would, yeah.
But in the Torah, these are the booths that they use. So the connection, there's no connection on Shavuot.
So I need to reread what the verses are. Well, but it is clear from Jewish history
Connection is
that
that if you look at the timing, they were
That's-
desert before they got up close to the end of.
Yeah, but I think that's important, the 50 days is the same amount of time that they traveled, and you're counting this from the same moment of Exodus. So I think there's. You can look at what exactly.
Closest connection.
That's a strong connection, I think. But from a very early time, it was connected.
Which is a month early. It says in the third month they left.
But in the third month of their leaving. I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but all I can say is from a very early time, Shavuot was connected
know,
both
but-
with.
The dates never mentioned either in the book.
I need to look,
I don't think it.
maybe, not.
It talks about 7 weeks. in
Maybe,
Shavuot,
maybe.
but it
I
never
need to-
called
it may
the
not
holiday
be referred to
Shavuot.
as- Yeah, I'm saying.
Right.